Kirill Kaprizov's record-breaking deal with the Minnesota Wild just highlights how valuable David Pastrnak is to the Boston Bruins on his current contract and why this team cannot afford to waste his prime years.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, October 1st. Soak it in. You can feel hockey just around the corner. And on today's episode, we are going to discuss what Kirill Kaprizov's record-breaking contract means for the Boston Bruins in relation to David Pastrnak's deal, the cap hit he's currently carrying, comparing the two players. Also, we'll look again at what could have been with Kaprizov and the Boston Bruins and who this might affect moving forward in relation to contracts the Bruins might have to sign. Since it is October 1st, we'll also take a look at what is next for the Boston Bruins and what needs to be done here before next Wednesday's opening night tilt with the Washington Capitals. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Before we get into today's episode, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I have been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for almost 2 decades. Now, just a couple weeks ago, we discussed Kaprizov rejecting reportedly a $128 million contract and putting his future with the franchise in doubt. Yesterday, he signed a record-setting deal, 8 years, $136 million extension with the Wild. That's not only the most total dollars ever given to an NHL player in one deal, but it also marks the highest average annual value, $17 million per season, and one of the highest cap hit percentages as well, 16.3% of next year's projected ceiling. Only 4 players in NHL history have made $136 million in their entire careers: Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Anze Kopitar. 28-year-old fifth-round pick back in 2015. Certainly a remarkable, dynamic talent. And he has tied for 4th in goals per game and 6th in points per game over the last 4 seasons. Yet to win a Stanley Cup or a Hart Trophy. He hasn't even been named to a year-end All-Star team or earned any other major NHL award since being named Rookie of the Year 5 seasons ago. He's now the owner of the league's highest cap hit, and by a pretty big margin. Right now, it's Leon Draisaitl, $14 million. Kaprizov making a significant jump over that at 17. And if you compare it to big deals recently signed by Mikko Rantanen, Mitch Marner, who both had $12 million contracts signed, it's pretty remarkable. And that leads me to think about how good David Pastrnak's contract is for the Boston Bruins. Let's quickly compare these two guys, say, over the past 3 seasons. Now, Kaprizov has had some health issues. He's been limited to 183 games over the past 3 seasons, whereas our boy Pasta has been very healthy with a full 246 games. He's got 151 goals compared to 111 for Kaprizov, 178 assists versus 116 for Kaprizov, a full 102 more points than Kaprizov over the past 3 seasons, 329 compared to 227. Yes, Kaprizov has played about 63 fewer games, but points per game, David Pastrnak 1.34 versus 1.24 for Kirill Kaprizov. He's also got 4.5 shots per game compared to Kaprizov's 3.7, 13.6 shots per 60 compared to 10.4 for Kaprizov. And this is in, less ice time as well. Kaprizov averaging 21.36, Pastrnak down at 19.54, and Kaprizov with about 10 seconds on average more ice time as well. And it's not just over the past, say, 3 seasons. Kaprizov entered the NHL, again, about 5 seasons ago, winning the Calder Trophy. Since the beginning of the 2020-2021 NHL season, David Pastrnak ranks 6th in total points, only one behind Artemi Panarin and Mikko Rantanen. So basically top 5 in points. In terms of points per game, he ranks 8th, 1.24. This is over the past 5 seasons since Kaprizov entered the league. He's at 1.21, and he ranks about 15th in total points. In terms of goals over the past 5 seasons, only 2 players have scored more than David Pastrnak, Leon Draisaitl, and Austin Matthews. Kaprizov ranks 9th in the NHL with 185 compared to 211 for Pastrnak. So by pretty much all measures, Pastrnak has been more productive than Kirill Kaprizov since he entered the NHL in 2020-2021. Kaprizov, I mean. Pastrnak is also tied for first. Pastrnak is tied for first in shots, total shots, since that time. David Pastrnak is one of the premier players in the NHL, as is Kaprizov. To be fair, he has been a dynamic talent since jumping into the NHL, pretty much from day one. Pastrnak, though, has been better, and they're not even that much different in terms of age, right? Kaprizov is 28. Pastrnak is 29. He's going to be 30 at his next birthday in May. Kaprizov will be 29 in April. So there's about a 1-year difference, and they were drafted 1 year apart. Kaprizov, of course, jumped to the NHL later, and Pastrnak has had more runway to kind of develop and become who he is at the NHL level. But for there to be an almost $6 million difference in terms of their average annual valuations for the next several seasons, yes, it speaks to a rising salary cap. Yes, it speaks to perhaps the Minnesota Wild not being exceptionally good at negotiating. For them to jump immediately $3 million over Leon Draisaitl is kind of bewildering. But it just shows you how good the Bruins have it with David Pastrnak, a player of his talents, locked up at $11.25 million. And he's been healthy the last 3 seasons. He's been as productive as anybody in that span. Let's look at the last 3 seasons and see how good David Pastrnak has been. Over that span, 3 seasons, 2022-23 to 2024-25, Pastrnak ranks 5th in total points in the NHL. Where does Kaprizov fit in? He is 32nd. Yes, he's played far fewer games due to injury. So if you look at points per game, David Pastrnak ranks 5th at 1.34, and Kaprizov is in a tie for 6th at 1.24. When it comes to goals, nobody has scored more goals than David Pastrnak over the past 3 seasons. 151, 6 more than Leon Draisaitl, albeit in about 14 more games. 9 more than Austin Matthews in about 24 more games. So yes, he's been benefiting from health. And on the flip side, though, especially last year where he led the NHL in points, assists, goals, 5-on-5, the power play was dreadful. So his numbers should be even better than they are based on that lack of power play finish for this team last year. So all that to say, the Bruins have David Pastrnak locked up at a very nice contract for the foreseeable future, and they cannot afford to waste his prime years, which they seem to be on track to do, unfortunately. Coming up, we're going to discuss a couple more ties with Kaprizov and the Boston Bruins, what it could mean for this team moving forward with the rising cap and who could command new deals. We'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks here, folks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Okay, not to rehash this too much, but Kaprizov signing this record-setting deal reminds us that the Bruins did own the pick in 2015 that the Minnesota Wild used to select Kaprizov. It was coming into the 5th round of this, what's now become a pretty historic draft, and the Bruins decided to swap their 5th round pick to the Wild in exchange for Minnesota's 5th round pick in 2016. Apparently, they didn't see anything on the board that was tantalizing, and they kind of missed out on a couple pretty decent players, a few decent players actually, at the 2015 NHL entry draft at that spot. First of all, there's Kaprizov, who, he was a bit unknown at that point. He was a guy who, of course, comes over from overseas, not a guy that was projected to be who he has become by any stretch of the imagination. He was playing over in the KHL, had 8 points in 31 games for Novokuznetsk Metallurg in 2014-15, and didn't really take off at the KHL level until a couple years after he was drafted. So not necessarily a guy that you look at and think, well, this is going to be a steal at this point. There was also a couple other guys who jumped up pretty well from that round as well, though. We look at Anaheim, Troy Terry. He's got 285 points in 427 games. You look a bit further down the list, Andrew Mangiapane has become a pretty reliable scorer for a variety of clubs. Vladislav Gavrikov just got a pretty big deal from the New York Rangers. So there were some players on the table, but the Bruins, again, decided to give up that pick and send it to Minnesota for what became Cameron Clark the next year, a guy that I talked about a couple of weeks ago as the Bruin of the day when it was, when Kaprizov had reportedly rejected that previous offer. So, not to rub things in too much, because we all know the story of the 2015 NHL entry draft, but it goes to show you that scouting is very important. The Wild clearly saw something and wanted to grab a pick so that they could take Kaprizov. The Bruins in 2026 have 2 firsts, a second, a third, 2 fourths, a sixth, and a seventh. Get that scouting team out there so they can perhaps catch some diamonds in the rough out there. Now, when it comes to the rising cap and what it means for the Bruins, well, again, David Pastrnak is signed at $11.25 million through to the end of 2030-31. So another 6 seasons. There's going to be a lot of guys who are going to be making a lot more money than David Pastrnak in that span. You got Jack Eichel, Kyle Connor coming up as free agents. I've even heard Martin Necas could command Pastrnak money or more. Of course, Connor McDavid, who should be up around $20 million if this is the market that is being set by Kaprizov. The Bruins don't have a ton of guys coming up as pending free agents who are going to be commanding big-time money like that. They've already got their core locked up. McAvoy was part of that market resetting defense group, like Zach Werenski, Darnell Nurse, Seth Jones, all making around $9.5 million. Jeremy Swayman, of course, was part of the goalie reset. He's at $8.25 million. Coming up as unrestricted free agents for the Bruins over the next couple of years, you have Victor Arvidsson, who's 32 already. He's not going to be setting any records. Pavel Zacha, going to be a free agent at the end of 2026-27. He could see a significant jump. If you have Elias Lindholm making 7.75 at around age 29, Zacha will be 30. He should be in line for a pretty significant bump. Probably not with the Boston Bruins, but we'll see. Casey Middlestat, he's 26, making $5.75 million. If he pops over the next couple of years, who knows what his ceiling could be. I'm not saying he's going to make double digits necessarily, but he could be making $9 million if he is even an average second line center. This is where the market is going. On defense, you're going to have Mason Lohrei as an RFA in a couple years. If he's able to take his game to the next level, then perhaps he's making pretty decent money for this team on his next contract. The big one, of course, to look at will be James Higgins, who has yet to sign his entry-level contract. He could conceivably sign at the end of this college season, potentially burn the first year of that deal if he plays 10 games with the Bruins to end the season. Maybe they wait and allow that 3 full years of the entry-level deal. So say that's at the end of 2028 or 2029. If he comes out and plays as a top-line center right from day one, on his next contract, he could easily be the Bruins' highest-paid player above David Pastrnak if he comes in and is a number 1 center for this team, wins the Calder Trophy, say, next year, or, heck, leads this team to the playoffs and deep into them. That's a lot to ask. That's a lot to project, but it's not impossible. Look what Kaprizov did from day one with the Wild, albeit a bit further advanced in age after a few seasons at the KHL level. But not impossible. And he's probably the next big contract guy for the Boston Bruins, unless they decide they want to keep Pavel Zacha or Casey Middlestat, who could command pretty big money on the open market as centers, especially if they have pretty good seasons for this team over the next couple. Anyways, that's all of what Kirill Kaprizov's contract means for the Boston Bruins. And I mean, let's appreciate how good we have it with David Pastrnak signed at 11.25, almost $6 million per season less than Kirill Kaprizov. That's pretty insane. All right, coming up, it is October 1st. Bruins play their season opener in 1 week, and there's a lot to be determined prior to that time. Let's take a look at what the next week will hold here as the podcast continues. Football season is well underway, and there's no better time to get in on the action than every single kickoff. And you can do so with FanDuel. They've got an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. People love using FanDuel because it gives them so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, even follow the live lines during games. Makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Again, place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. How is it October already? It was pretty chilly up here this morning, single digits Celsius. Going to be almost time to break out the toques, and Bruins hockey is just around the corner. 1 week until the season opener against the Washington Capitals. And there's a lot to be decided between now and then. The Bruins still have a couple preseason games, one against the New York Rangers, one against the Washington Capitals, both of whom they've played already, losing to Washington, having that comeback against the Rangers. And there's some decisions to be made, primarily in net, where they still have to decide what they're going to do with the backup position. Talked yesterday about Jeremy Swayman's somewhat rusty preseason debut. Made some great saves, made a couple mistakes. Michael DiPietro, Eunice Korpisalo have been similarly up and down, and there's a real conversation to be had about whether or not they're going to try to send Michael DiPietro to Providence, thereby exposing him to the waiver wire, where a guy like Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts suggests he could very well be plucked because there's no shortage of teams looking to shore up their goaltending depth. They also have to decide if they're going to send their waiver exempt players like Fraser Minton, Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell down to Providence and keep guys up like Sean Corrali, Michael Eyssimont, Alex Steves, Matej Blumel, all of whom would have to go on waivers in order to be sent down. Work cut out for him in terms of making those decisions. Season opener 1 week away. I'm so excited about Boston Bruins hockey, and it makes me feel like a kid again.